Simplicity is real. High on a hill wrapped in soft clouds stood the small temple of Ryasanan. It wasn't famous, nor grand, nor particularly ancient. There were no golden statues or towering roofs. Its beams were dark wood, its stone garden almost hidden beneath moss, and its bell rang like a whisper rather than a thunderclap. Yet those who arrived there said something in that place gave them their breath back, as if their soul had been holding it for years. Living in that temple was an elderly monk named Sean. No one knew exactly how many winters he had seen, but his steps were as slow and calm as snowflakes falling without hurry. Sean woke before dawn every day, swept the front path with a broom of dry twigs, and warmed water in an old iron kettle. His life was so simple that many visitors thought he seemed poor, and yet no one could say he lacked anything. One early autumn morning, a young man from the city named Run arrived at the temple. He carried a large backpack, dark sunglasses, and a notebook filled with notes. Ren had studied Eastern philosophy at university. He'd read Laozi, Dogen, Rinzai, and Suzuki. He believed he was ready to understand the ultimate truth. Upon arrival, he bowed nervously and introduced himself. "Master Sean, I've come to learn true Zen." Sean looked at him without rush, as if watching how the wind moved through the trees. "And what have you brought with you, Ren?" "I brought books, questions, recordings, a list of practices, and, well, a few expectations too." The old monk nodded with a faint smile and gestured for him to leave his backpack by the entrance. "Then first empty yourself," he said. "No one can drink from a bowl that's already full." Ren felt a little offended. Empty himself? After years of searching and study? But he obeyed. He entered, removed his shoes, left his backpack aside, and sat across from Sean on a tatami mat that smelled of dry wood and silence. The master simply served tea. He didn't speak. He didn't offer a koan. He gave no explanation. He just poured steaming water into 2 clay cups, so imperfect they looked as if a child had made them. Ren waited for a profound lecture, a revealing teaching, but all he received was a warm cup in his hands. "Drink," Sean said. "Tea needs no words." And for several minutes, the only sounds were the crunching of leaves in the garden and the faint clink of cups resting on a wooden tray. Run felt discomfort rise in his chest. Was this it? All that journey, just for a cup of tea? "Master, I thought Zen was something more elevated," he dared to say. Sean looked at him with calm eyes and replied, "More elevated than the taste of warm water in your mouth? More profound than silence shared." Ren lowered his gaze. He didn't know what to say, and that was how his learning began. Not with a sutra, not with a great revelation, but with a cup of tea. A cup so simple it changed everything. The days at Ryasanan were so alike that time seemed to melt like candle wax in the shade. Ran, used to the bustle of the city, the rhythm of schedules, goals, and notifications, began to feel something slipping through his fingers. He woke to the distant caw of a crow and spent his mornings helping Sean with simple tasks. Gathering firewood, filling buckets with water from the stream, cleaning the moss garden without touching the stones. At first, he did these chores like someone waiting for a reward, as if they were merely the prelude to a deeper lesson. But the lessons never came. The master gave no speeches. He didn't answer philosophical questions. Sometimes, he would simply point to the sky or to the sunlight reflected in a drop of dew and say, "Look closely, that too is the path." One afternoon, as they swept the temple's outer corridor together, Run couldn't hold back any longer. He stopped, leaned on his broom, and said, "Master, I've been here a week. I've done what you asked, but I still don't understand anything. I haven't had any insight. Nothing has been revealed." Sean looked at him silently, like someone watching a child about to cry, not with judgment, but with tenderness. "What do you expect to be revealed?" he asked gently. "I don't know," Ren replied, frustrated. Something to wake me up, something to show me the truth, to tell me what's real." The old master bent down and picked up a yellow leaf that had just fallen from a ginkgo tree. He held it in his palm and showed it to him. "And this, is it not real?" "Yes, but..." "And you, in this moment, aren't you real?" "Yes, but..." "Then why are you looking beyond?" Ren lowered his gaze, and for the first time had no but. The wind blew softly, barely lifting the hem of his robe. Sean closed his hand over the leaf, then let it fall gently to the ground. "Those who seek the extraordinary," he said, "rarely recognize what is true, because truth doesn't shout, it doesn't dazzle, it doesn't impress. It simply is, like the leaf, like you, like this moment." That night, Ren didn't write in his notebook. He didn't read any texts. He sat for a long time under the temple's eaves, listening to the sound of drops falling from the roof into a stone basin. And for the first time in many years, he felt no urgency to understand. He just felt. He didn't know what to call it, but he knew he had started to see. From that day on, Ren stopped asking so many questions. Not because he had found the answers, but because he began to suspect that some questions only exist when we drift away from direct experience. He started paying attention to things he used to overlook. The sound of his footsteps on damp earth, the way steam rose from the kettle each morning, the erratic flight of a dragonfly over the pond. Small things, simple things. Sean never interrupted that process. He didn't explain what was happening. He simply accompanied him, like a river that doesn't teach you to swim, but allows you to learn by floating. One morning, as they gathered the last fallen branches after a rainy night, Ren stopped. A single drop of water, hanging from the tip of a leaf, shimmered with the colors of the sky. He remained there, watching it for a long time, as if it were the first time he had ever truly seen water. "Master, why were we never taught to see like this?" he asked, eyes still fixed on the droplet. Sean answered after a quiet pause, "Because seeing in this way can't be taught. It can only be remembered." Remembered? Yes, we were all born knowing, but we forgot, chasing what is complicated. They taught us to see concepts, not things. Words, not presence. The mind filled with ideas and emptied of life. Ren sighed. He felt something inside him, an old tension, a need to control, to interpret, to classify, begin to dissolve. "And if everything is really this simple," he said, "then Zen is nothing more than this?" Sean smiled gently. "Exactly. But that this you speak of, you've given it 1,000 names without ever truly seeing it. Zen is not a concept. It's the way water wets, the way fire warms, the way wind doesn't need permission to be wind. Simplicity is reality. Everything else is noise." That night, a cool breeze carried the scent of wet earth through the air. Ren sat once more beside the oil lamp in the small dining room of the temple. He picked up a cup, filled his bowl with tea, and held it between his hands. He didn't think about the meaning of the gesture. He didn't write it in his notebook. He simply did it. And in that moment, he realized something he had never imagined, that perhaps there was nothing to attain, because nothing had ever truly been missing. He only had to be, and being was enough. As autumn settled in, the trees surrounding Ryasanen began to undress with quiet dignity. The falling leaves didn't seem to surrender. They seemed to return. Ren watched them descend each day, as if the whole world were teaching him how to let go without fear. He no longer rushed to sweep them. Sometimes, he simply let them rest upon the stone path. as one might honor the final word of someone who has spent a lifetime in silence. One morning, as steam rose gently from the clay pot of rice, Ren asked softly, "Master, if simplicity is what's real, why do we all chase after what's complicated?" Sean finished serving a portion, sat down in front of him, and answered as if he had heard that question many times before. Because the mind fears emptiness. It wants to fill it with things, with ideas, with desires. Complexity is noise that distracts us from the nakedness of the present. And yet, the present is always here. "But the world taught me that simplicity is not enough," said Ren. "That I must be more, know more, achieve more." The master broke off a piece of pickled radish and placed it in Ren's bowl. "Taste this." Ren did. He chewed in silence. The flavor was earthy, sharp, quietly layered. When he opened his eyes, Sean was watching him with an expression that seemed to go beyond judgment. "How many ingredients are in that radish?" "Just one." "And was it enough?" Ren lowered his head, somewhere between ashamed and deeply moved. That single, simple taste had touched him more than any feast he'd ever had in the city. There was something in that small piece of vegetable that felt more real than all the lectures he had read about reality in his books. After their meal, they walked to the river together. They didn't speak. The water moved through the rocks with a voice that needed no translation. Sean knelt and cupped his hands, then let the water drip in silence. "Reality needs no decoration," he said. "We invent it because we've forgotten how to see." Ren crouched down and drank the same way. The water was cold and alive. He felt it flow down his throat without permission or expectation, as if it returned a part of him he hadn't known was missing. That day, Ren didn't write. He didn't speak. He didn't think. He just was. And that, he discovered, was the hardest thing, and the most real. The days became indistinguishable, like raindrops falling on the same rooftop. Ren began to lose track of time. He no longer knew how many sunrises he had witnessed since arriving at the temple, how many times he had poured tea, or how many leaves he had swept. But instead of anxiety, that loss of reference brought a kind of peace, as if the measure of a day was no longer the clock, but the heart. Sean continued his unchanging routine. He didn't preach. He didn't impose. His teaching was in the way he moved, in how he opened a window without making a sound, how he warmed the rice without watching the flame, how he closed a door as if asking permission from the air. In every gesture, there was a reverence, not toward something, but from something, a quiet inner place that needed no explanation. One night, after dinner, Ren dared to speak. "Master, how did you learn to live like this?" Sean looked up from his empty bowl and thought for a moment before replying. "By forgetting everything I was taught," he said finally. Ren frowned. "Everything. Everything that didn't come from silence, yes. And what remained?" Sean pointed to the room around them, the tatami beneath their feet, the bowl, the night beyond the sliding doors. "This, nothing more." There was a long silence, not uncomfortable, but vast, as if the entire temple were breathing with them. Outside, the wind rustled the bamboo. Inside, a candle flickered, casting soft shadows on the wood. "Master," Ren said more slowly, "and what about suffering? Where does it go when one becomes so simple?" Sean didn't answer right away. He rose, took a small oil lantern, and gestured for Ren to follow. They stepped into the garden, where the stones were damp with dew, and walked silently to the pond. There, the old monk knelt down and pointed to the reflection of the moon in the water. "Do you see that moon?" Ren nodded. "It's not in the water, but it appears to be, and if you throw a stone, you disturb it. You think you've touched it, but it remains up there, untouched. What does that mean? That suffering is like the stone. It doesn't touch the truth of who we are. It only ripples the reflection. If you identify with the image, you believe the moon is broken. But the moon never changes. Run fell silent, watching the ripples expand across the pond's surface. And he understood, not with his mind, but with something older, deeper, that pain cannot destroy what is essential, only blur it for a while. So, he whispered, living simply is seeing the moon again without the stones? Living simply, said Sean, is no longer throwing the stones. They returned to the temple unhurried. That night, Ren slept without dreams, not because he had none, but because he no longer needed them. For the first time in years, his soul wasn't chasing anything. And when he awoke, he didn't search for meaning in the crow's song, or in the light filtered through the beams, or in the sound of water boiling. He simply received it, and in receiving it, he knew he was already whole. The forest trees began to shed their last leaves. The earth took on a darker, denser tone, as if the world were folding in on itself, preparing for a long, silent sleep. Ren felt it in his own body. His breath was slower, his steps more deliberate, and his mind less demanding. He hadn't stopped thinking, but his thoughts were no longer shouts. They were whispers, passing like clouds across the sky. One afternoon, while gathering firewood, Ren paused to observe a moss-covered log. There was nothing special about it, no strange shape, no striking color. And yet, in its stillness, there was a beauty that couldn't be explained. He ran his hand across the moss and felt its warm, damp texture, soft, like a childhood memory. Suddenly, he remembered his former life, the rushed coffees, the glowing screens deep into the night, the talks about productivity, the yearly goals, the meetings postponed over and over again. It all felt so distant now. He briefly wondered if he had ever truly lived it. That night, in front of the fire, he asked Sean, "What if I don't go back? What if I stay here forever?" The master didn't reply immediately. He was tending the fire with a slow breath, as if caring for more than just flames. Finally, he said, "That too is thought. Staying and leaving are only shadows of time. But you are not made of time." Ren sat in silence, thoughtful. Sean added, without changing his tone, "Don't try to escape the world. You don't need to abandon the city to live in peace. But you do need to abandon the illusion that peace is somewhere else." So, can I carry this simplicity with me? You don't need to carry it. It's always been with you. You just have to not forget. The fire crackled gently. Run brought his hands closer, watching the glowing embers, like tiny sleeping suns. "And if I forget, Master?" he asked, a hint of sadness in his voice. "If I return to the noise and lose this clarity, what will I do?" Sean looked at him with compassion. "Then you'll remember. The simple act of stopping, of breathing, of looking at a tree will be enough. Because what is real cannot be lost. It only gets covered. And what if the pain returns?" "It will return," said the old man without fear. "But if you don't fight it, if you let it pass like a winter rain, it too will go. Suffering only clings to what we refuse to let go." Ren nodded in silence. He felt a strange mix of fragility and strength, as if everything he had ever learned was dissolving, yet not destroying him. It was as though a new way of being was emerging, not from effort, but from stillness. That night, as the wind gently tapped against the temple shutters, Ren wrote in his notebook for the last time, "I haven't learned anything new, but I've remembered everything I already knew." And he left the notebook on the shelf, beside a smooth stone he had found in the river. He no longer felt the need to record, because what is true is never forgotten. It is simply lived. Winter began to whisper its way in, with a cold breath descending from the mountains. Mornings were slower. The steam rising from the rice pot floated like a silent prayer, and the sound of a wooden bowl on the table was almost the only thing heard at dawn. The Ryasanan temple, now covered in frost, looked even more humble, more invisible to the world, and yet more alive than ever. Ren had changed, not suddenly, like someone reaching a mountaintop, but like moss growing quietly over stone. He no longer spoke about himself. He no longer said, "I feel" or "I want to understand." He simply was. He walked. He gathered firewood without imagining destinations. He prepared tea without expecting wisdom. One morning, upon waking, he found Master Shan sitting by the pond, motionless, his back straight like a dry tree trunk, his gaze resting on the frozen surface of the water. Ren sat beside him without a word. They remained like that for a long while. Neither wind, nor cold, nor silence disturbed them. In fact, they were part of the moment. At last, the old man spoke softly. "When I was your age," he said, "I too was searching for depth. But one day, a farmer gave me a rice bun. He didn't say a word. He didn't wrap it. He didn't explain his intention. He just gave it to me, and I understood everything." Rin didn't reply. He simply waited. That simplicity revealed what the books were hiding. Zen isn't in the words that describe it. It's in the acts that need no name. A bowl of rice, a warm bun, a cup of tea, a falling leaf. What is simple holds no pride, but it holds up the world. Sean leaned forward and scooped a bit of snow into his palm. "See this?" he said. "It has no fixed shape. It doesn't struggle to remain. It doesn't need you to understand it. It simply falls. It melts and disappears. But for a brief moment, it exists completely." Ren nodded. He no longer tried to understand. He no longer worried about capturing the teaching. He felt that the teaching was him when he stopped thinking and started living. Sean closed his eyes for a moment. Many come here eager to awaken, and that's fine. But there comes a point when even that desire must be released. Because awakening is not an achievement. It's a return. A return to where? Ren asked gently. To what you already are, when you stop resisting being. Then, with a barely noticeable motion, Sean let the snow fall from his hand. He watched it vanish between the stones of the path and murmured, "All that is true is like this, comes without making a sound, and leaves without asking permission." That afternoon, Ren walked alone through the forest. His steps sought no destination. They fled from nothing. He walked with open eyes, but a quiet mind, as if every branch, every stone, every sigh of the woods were speaking to him in a language that needed no translation. And there, in the middle of that purposeless walk, Ren understood, not with thoughts, but with his entire being, that the simple was not the path to the real. The simple was the real. The winter sun appeared each morning like a shy visitor, barely lighting the frost-covered tiles and the stone paths of the temple. Crows traced the sky with their black wings, and the steam rising from the kitchen floated like invisible incense. Everything looked the same, and yet everything had changed. Ren had stopped counting the days. He no longer knew whether weeks or months had passed. The notebook where he once recorded his thoughts remained untouched, not because there were no reflections, but because each gesture, each sip of tea, each step, each moment of silence, had become a kind of writing without ink, a formless truth. One morning, while preparing rice in the small stone kitchen, Sean spoke with a calm that seemed to come from far away. "It's time for you to return." Ren, stirring the rice with a wooden spoon, paused. "Return?" "Yes, to the world, to the city, to the everyday." Ren looked down. He thought perhaps he wasn't ready, that there was still something more to learn, something else to receive. But Sean, sensing his thoughts, said, "There is nothing more to receive. What you've been seeking, you've already touched. Zen is not about staying at the top of the mountain. It's about bringing the mountain with you, wherever you go." Ren took a deep breath. Inside, he felt something opening, and it didn't hurt. "What if I get lost again?" he asked sincerely, not with fear, but with humility. "Then remember," the master replied, "you can stop, sit, and breathe. And in that gesture, expecting nothing, you will return." "And what if I forget?" "Forgetting is part of the path. What is real doesn't need to be remembered, only to be paused for." That same afternoon, Ren packed his bag. He took almost nothing: a change of clothes, a woven scarf, a clay cup. Everything else he left behind, not out of rejection, but out of gratitude. What he no longer needed, he gave back to silence. Before departing, he bowed deeply before the master. Sean said nothing. He simply placed a smooth stone, the size of a walnut, into Ren's hand. "Keep this with you," he said. "It's not a charm. It's not a symbol. It's just a stone. But when you feel it, remember, what is real doesn't need to be adorned to be sacred." Ren put it away without a word. And so he walked down the temple path, his steps firm, his mind light. Every branch that cracked underfoot felt as if the forest were saying goodbye, or perhaps welcome back. He returned to the city, to the noise, to distracted glances, ticking clocks, and glass buildings. But he was no longer the same. Now, when he sat on the subway, he looked at people without judgment. When he ate, he gave thanks for the rice. When it rained, he paused beneath a tree without rushing. And at night, before sleep, he would take the stone from his pocket and place it on the table. He didn't think about it. He didn't try to interpret it. He simply let it be, like Zen, like himself, like life, when it lets go of everything and reveals itself in its purest form. Simple, real, whole.